to public choice. So now we dive into our public choice unit. Public choice is a field of economics which is not typically part of an introductory macro course. Increasingly, though, it's become more mainstream. It's particularly valuable for us to discuss because as we move through the semester, especially toward the end, we bring up like what the government should do during a recession. And so it's helpful to have a little bit of public choice background. This is going to sound weird, but it was revolutionary at the time. It's going to sound weird that it is like considered revolutionary, but for most of economics history, we had this attitude of like the private sector is our domain, and this is the stuff we talk about, and then the public sector is something else. And if we find some problem with the private sector, just like an instance of pollution or something, we can say, and then the government comes and fixes these little problems. But generally speaking, the economy is over here, and the public sector is over here. We don't really have anything to say. That's the political science department. Go talk to them. At around 1962, this starts to change. And economists, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, I should say, before 1962, but we start to see more economists comment on this area. And the founder of public choice, James Buchanan, would later win the Nobel Prize for his work. And essentially, he's saying we need to stop thinking in terms of these separate, like, as economists, we don't have anything to say about the public sector. We have stuff to say, stuff that is useful and stuff that is interesting. And so he and other economists, like Gordon Tullock, for example, another big name, started defining this idea of public choice. And it simply says that simply economics applied to political actors or applied to politics. When I say actor, I don't mean someone who is pretending to be someone else in a movie. Actor is economic speak for someone who does something. They act. They take purposeful action. Public choice has two sort of tenets. The first of these tenets is something that has sort of seeped into all areas of economics. It's something we explicitly state now and think about. It has this a very, very heavy, lofty term to it, but it means something very simple. When we approach questions, and when we think about, who wants who and the motivation, we're always going to put that methodology in terms of the individual. So we call this methodological individualism. I know. It's a big lofty term. Just go with it. It simply just says, look, only individuals act. So we would not say, or it is sloppy to say, that China doesn't want a trade war. I'm like, that doesn't really make any sense. Why? Yeah, go ahead. Because China's a country, yeah. Exactly. Okay, well, can I say China, the Chinese government doesn't want a trade war? Is that better? Is that correct? It's not. Why not? Exactly. Some people do and some people don't, right? That's better than saying all of China doesn't want a trade war. But the government, any government, is a body of people, a body of individuals, and only individuals act. Only individuals can want something. It's sometimes a convenient shorthand to talk in terms of things that the U.S. want or things that the Department of Labor want and so forth. But we recognize that's inherently sloppy. individuals want things. So we put individuals at the center. And this kind of comes out of public choice in part because it's in areas of, say, international relations that people can most obviously and most clearly make that mistake. But that isn't necessarily unique to public choice. We're also going to note behavioral symmetry. There is a tendency to think that certain people in government just are different than people outside of government. There's a tendency to think in terms of like, oh, if you work for the EPA, you must be a good person. Right? How many people have a good opinion of the Environmental Protection Agency? And they think, oh, they do good work. Okay, people, yeah, oh, they do good work, right? And that doesn't mean they don't do good work. But if you meet somebody who works for the department, for the EPA, do you think of them as this is probably a good person? Right? Or do you find someone who works for the Department of Labor? It's like, oh, they're probably a good person. Right? You think that. And it's true, they might be. But we are not going to assume that just because somebody works for a government or a particular agency or an interest group, that they must be different than people who do not work for that agency or interest group. We're not going to assume that tobacco lobbyists are evil, but people who represent the elderly are good. We're going to say that, look, political actors are no different than non-political actors. Now, you might be thinking, well, duh. They have their own motivation and they can be corrupt and all these things. But again, keep in mind that this became a thing 50s and 60s, and there has been since then a real shift in people's opinion about government in the past 50 years, really ever since Nixon. People started thinking in terms of, wow, the government actually is filled with selfish people who only want power and are greedy in that way. We still have this tendency to be romantic about government. Whenever anyone says this, industry is unregulated, the instinct for a lot of people is to say, oh, that means it's dangerous. Oh, that's bad. When people say we should regulate this industry, there's still an instinct of people to say, oh, well, that would be good if we regulate the industry. So if you find yourself falling into that thought process, then this clearly obvious thing is something that you will sometimes not believe. Because regulators are people too. Regulators have their own self-interest. They might not align with public interest. So we should not assume that people who work for the government are good and people who don't work for the government are bad. Right? It's not so simple. We're going to assume that they are subject to the same kind of constraints, the same preferences, the same flaws as anyone else. Behavioral symmetry. Any questions? So, big area in economics. Because political actors can cover lots of people. Can anyone name me some political actors, some groups of political actors? Yeah. So I talked about, again, what'd you say? Someone said
the FDA.
Congress, FTA. So again, only individuals act. So we want to talk, so Congress, so lawmakers, we can say. Because that will cover, senators, representatives. Yeah. Lobbyists. What else? Politicians, well, that's lawmakers, right? But you can do appointees. Political appointees. We can do bureaucrats. So not necessarily someone who's appointed by a president and confirmed by the Senate, but maybe somebody who is just, the more everyday civil servants. Did you have your hand up? No. What? Voters. Yeah, we're political actors too. If you vote. And we can make a longer list. We can go on and on. I like that you brought up voters, because voters is the first one I want to talk about in detail. We can add judges if you want. Right, we can keep going. We can add prosecutors. We can add public defenders. There's a whole legal sector we can do. So the point is, this is a big area. All right. Any questions before we move on? So let's start with voters. Why do people vote? Right? If we're going to do behavioral symmetry, that means we're going to say voters are rational. That means we're going to have to say things like, so we have to try to explain their behavior. Why do people vote? Yeah.
To direct their country.
Okay. So, do you think that your vote changed anything in, say, the latest election, whether we're talking presidential or Senate or representative or state or local elections?
Just for more local ones, probably, or national ones. Less so.
Less so, sure. Your single vote.
Yeah.
What's another reason why people vote?
They feel pressure.
They feel pressure to. What do you mean?
People have a whole concept of or not the concept, but there's the whole thing of voting is a duty.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people who may or may not fully understand the consequences background of the candidates in any given election may vote because they feel like it's their duty to vote without actually doing the research.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I like this pressure, because you can, of course, lie.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I voted today. But then you're lying to your friends, and that's kind of awkward. And sometimes they make it hard for you to lie, because they're like, they call you, and there's always someone who's really annoying that they know. It's like, I'm going to go vote. It's the first thing in the morning. You're going to come with me. And it's kind of hard to say, like, I already voted. But maybe you do, right? Because you can vote early. But still, you don't want to lie. Like, people also enjoy participating in the political process, right? There's something wonderful about this idea that we don't have a king and we can kick out people that we don't like, right? That voters as a group can. So, or maybe you really love a candidate, or you really hate a candidate, and you get joy out of voting for them or against them, even if your vote is unlikely to make a difference. So there's all these reasons why people vote. But of course, people do not vote randomly, at least we hope they wouldn't. And so we should take a moment and appreciate why people vote the way they do. That's really the key. It matters who you vote for. As long as you vote, everyone, people say you should vote. It matters who you vote for. So outcomes matter. So to illustrate this idea, I turn you to Google Trends. Do we know what Google Trends is? Anyone? No? So, what's Google Trends? Kervin, did you nod your head also slightly? No? Okay. Google Trends is a website that lets you essentially Google. You can ask Google, what are people searching for? So I asked Google, Declaration of Independence. When are people searching for the Declaration of Independence? And this is what came up. And you see, there are these very clear spikes about every year. What do you suppose people are... What is that? What do you guess what those very clear, narrow spikes are? Yeah. Along July 4th. Yeah, people are like, what are we celebrating again? I don't know. We declared our something from something. I don't know. Yeah. July 4th. But that's the week of July 4th, July 5th through 9th. If you're probably wondering what this other big spike is, around September. Anyone can guess what that is? So say again? No, I don't think. No, because if it was something very discrete like that, it would be a very narrow spike. If it was an election, it would only be once every 4 years. No. I don't know if people are. I don't know if you can make a logical connection between 9/11 and the Declaration of Independence. Maybe, but I think because of how kind of spread out, it's not super narrow like it is with 4th of July. So I assume this is actually students in high school doing research, because what happens at the beginning of, like, when you take your U.S. history course, one of the first things that's covered, Declaration of Independence. Right? So people maybe are looking up stuff, maybe some homework assignment or something. Right? That's why there's a little bit of give, because people cover it maybe at slightly different times and schools start at different times, but it's always going to be roughly at the beginning of the year. This also explains the huge drop here, this first huge drop, which is, what's this first huge drop aligning with? Thanksgiving. And then the next big drop? Christmas. I'm not going to do any work during break. What are you talking about? No. This also explains, too, why the huge drop is right here. There's a huge increase right here. What's special about this time? The one time it's bigger than the 4th of July jump. Look at the year. COVID, right? Everyone is online. Right? So, there's a lot more online learning, so people are searching for it more. What's in the Declaration of Independence? Nope. You're thinking of Constitution. What's in the Declaration?
The rights of
And don't tell me it's when we declare independence. What was that?
the rights of U.S. citizens.
Nope. Rights are in the Constitution. King George, exactly, right? Do you remember any of those grievances? Oh, usually I get people. How many of you, by the way, have read the Declaration of Independence? I'm going to say some of you because you know some. So what are some? Sure, I'm not asking you to quote it. Come on.
Colonists being forced to allow British troops into their homes,
Mm-hmm.
and then taxes on things like paper.
Yeah. The quartering of British troops, by the way, we have that in the Constitution as a Bill of Rights, because we don't, we were like really pissed off about that. Beatrice, did you have something? You read it. Do you remember any of it? No. Right. So, gold star for you though, because like that's the first time people have actually been able to quote me something from the Declaration, right? I remember, we didn't like how troops, right? There was all these complaints about how we had a concern about the king. We had to go all the way over across the ocean, which was a really big deal back in the 18th century. That's the complaint, right? People were pissed off. So it's mostly a list of these grievances, and it's like, this really sucks. We've tried to make this work. You're not helping us. We declared independence. And so people are like, every 4th of July, like, what are we celebrating at? I don't know. They Google it. Maybe some of them read it. I read the Declaration every 4th of July. It's a nice tradition. What else do people do on the 4th of July? Big thing at night? Fireworks. So what's cool about the Google Trends is we can go ahead and we can search for two things and compare them. So I'm going to add in fireworks. Now, when I hit the button, it's going to give me two different lines. The blue line will remain Declaration of Independence, and the red line will be fireworks. Do you still see the blue line? Right? That spike you saw, it's a speed bump now. Because now you see this huge spike on the 4th of July fireworks. Why are we celebrating this again? I don't care. Let's just blow some shit up. Right? By the way, in case you're curious, this other spike is New Year's. But this is clearly, right, it's the dominant effect. Also why it's very low, COVID year, not a lot of people doing fireworks stuff, COVID. Was this sad? Is this something we should be upset about? Yeah. Should we be sad that people are more interested in fireworks than like why they're celebrating the Declaration of Independence? Let me ask you this. I gave you all a primer on what the Declaration of Independence is. Now, I want to remind you that it's really important you're honest in this course. How has your life changed now that you know about the Declaration of Independence? And what's in it and what's not in it? Edward, how has your life changed? Again, it's important you're honest. Question is, now that I've told you something about the Declaration of Independence, how has your life changed? Again, just what well, yeah, but again, the rights are in the Constitution, right? They're not in the Declaration. The Declaration is just a list of things that we're annoyed about, or the colonists were annoyed about. How has your life changed? Anyone? How has your life changed? Yeah. It hasn't changed at all. Correct. Right. Again, if you're at a party, maybe it'll come up and you won't embarrass yourself for thinking that it was like involving, I don't know, the Magna Carta or something, separate. But it has not changed at all. When people are searching for fireworks, though, what are they searching for? Entertainment, right? Maybe I want to know where the fireworks display is happening in my neighborhood, so I can take my kids and make some memories, some family memories. What else? Yeah. Like online shopping. I want to get some deals for fireworks and save some money. Right? That has a material impact on my daily life. Maybe I'm looking up fireworks safety, right? So I don't hurt myself, right? There's lots of reasons why people have generally good reasons to look up fireworks that will have a material difference in how they live their lives. I look up Declaration of Independence. I don't know. Nothing's changed. A lot of people are ignorant about the Declaration of Independence. That doesn't mean they're stupid. That means they're rational. Thus, the term that governs a lot of voter behavior, rational ignorance. We do not want to say that, a lot of people, I just looked this up today, actually. Only about 1/3 of Americans can pass the citizenship test to become an American. About 1/3. Yeah. Stuff like what's the difference between a senator and a representative, and like what's the history of the United States, and stuff like if someone is from another country and they want to be a U.S. citizen, this is information that the U.S. government by law expects them to know, and you have to pass this test in order to become an American. And it's like, or you're just an American, and even if you don't know any of it, or half of it, or less than half of it, you're still a citizen. We don't take it away if people don't pass, as long as you're born. Does that mean Americans are stupid? We don't know our own history? No. What does it mean? Yeah, because we don't have an incentive to care. Because you're already an American. It can't be taken away. Rational ignorance is saying, look, there are costs of learning. And if the cost of learning exceed the benefits, people don't learn it. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means that quite the opposite. It means they're rational. Liam, when you said I vote because I want to make a difference, I'm sorry, you will not make a difference. You will not. Even on a local election. And then someone always points out, I heard this election, in which case that was this local election that was decided by only 33 votes. I literally had this conversation with somebody once. It was only 33 votes, so one vote matters. I'm like, no, you just demonstrated one vote doesn't matter. Because going from 33 to 32 still results in exactly the same outcome. There are, of course, very rare cases where it's a tie and one person can make a difference, but those are incredibly rare cases. So rare that they make national news, even if they're in the middle of nowhere. And they're always in some random little small town where there's only 18 voters or something anyway. Right? One vote will not matter. And so a lot of voters, when they vote, they are not doing research on the candidate because it's costly and why bother? A lot of voters just know these basic things. A lot of, in the most recent election. I was listening to a podcast just this morning. And people were saying, oh, well, you know, a lot of voters voted for Donald Trump and they knew what they were getting into. And I'm like, I don't think they did. I think a lot of voters were saying, I don't know, price of eggs is high and I'm mad. And so I'm going to vote this way. Not because that they're dumb, because they have other things going on in their lives and no one vote will matter and they just want to express themselves and they're annoyed. And this is how they can express themselves in the end. But when we think about voter behavior, one thing to keep in mind is that most voters do not know what they're talking about. And you've experienced this too. If you voted in local elections and you see the list of candidates for like school board, and you're like, I have no idea who these people are. How many of you do your research? Right? No one. How do you decide, by the way, who to vote for? When did you say a little bit?
Most of the time, but
Most of the time.
forget.
Let me say, I do it every time. I feel like a sucker every time I do it. Because every single time I will do that research. Because I'm like, I actually want to know who these people are. I will try to find information about them. For local candidates, where your chance of making an outcome, making a decision is most likely, it is hardest to get the information. Because they don't have some big campaign website usually. And if they do, maybe it's hard to find and all this stuff. And so then I vote, I figure out who I want to vote for, I vote for them, and then I like look at the numbers, results, and of course my vote did not matter. Right. Every single time I feel like a sucker. Do it. I don't know. All right. Any questions about that? Yeah.
If that's the case, then how come people still see the election system as productive? If the majority of voters aren't catered enough to place a vote based on what they actually do.
Well, the biggest reason is our standard Nirvana policy story. So if you say the voting system is flawed and stupid, and a lot of people don't know what they're talking about, and I'm like, great, I agree. What's your alternative? Well, is your alternative to have a king? Because that's probably worse. So that's one of the reasons. One, there's also a certain romance, right? That's why I mentioned this public choice stuff. Because we should not have romance about government. But a lot of people have that romance. And there are people who are motivated to vote because they do like having the feeling that their voice is heard, or they do have attachment to a candidate. They want to express that attachment in some ways. But if you're voting to make a difference, it doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Not much, but a little bit. All right, okay. Did I answer your question? I feel like I might have
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay, so what if it's like a whole group of people?
Ah. Well, that's a great point, right? So it's certainly true that one vote will not matter, but as you rightly note, lots of votes can matter. But remember, only individuals act. So from the candidate's perspective, it's like if I can get these big groups of people to do stuff, right? And this is why like campaigns will say, we will drive you to polls, right? They will find people that try to take them to polls because they're trying to make it really cheap for people to vote. But we don't want to say, well, this idea of rational ignorance of voters is wrong because lots of voters can matter. It's like, yeah, but I don't get lots of votes. Individuals get one vote. And you can see this, by the way, in stark contrast. There are circumstances where one person can have multiple votes. Corporate elections, where how many votes you get depends on how percent of the company that you own. Right? And suddenly, people who have big hunks of the company are really invested. Right? They're not rationally ignorant. Well, if you own like a little share of Apple, you're probably not going to do that much research. Okay. Well, that said, there are people, though, who you talk to, many voters you might talk to, and you're like, this person is not ignorant. They are weird and they are wrong, but they are not fundamentally clueless as to what's going on. How many of you have ever had a conversation with somebody whom you disagree with about politics, and you're like, this person is not making any goddamn sense? Yeah? Do you want to give me any details, or do you want to keep it? Usually people don't want to talk about it.
I'll be as vague as possible. I guess this person just was bringing up points in like a political conversation that were not based in reality at all.
Mhm.
It's kind of just like, I guess there's a whole thing of like wind tunnel effect when you're on one side of social media or
Mhm.
the internet. You see like things that are just only about that one thing.
Sure.
And so you start to think certain things about certain candidates when it's like people are putting that on your feet because they know that you're going to believe it.
Yeah.
And so they don't even know that like any kind of
And you can bring up really good points, and they don't care.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what's going on? Like, they're not ignorant, right? They know certain facts. They're interpreting them in a weird way, but they know certain facts.
Yeah.
Let me give you another example. So this is a different kind of problem. This is a different issue we have with voters. To illustrate, let's imagine you are walking along the sidewalk and you see cracks in the sidewalk. Do you avoid stepping on the cracks? How many of you raise your hand if you avoid stepping on those cracks? A few of you, yeah. Why do you avoid stepping on the cracks? Is it what? It's the same. What's the same? Trust me, it's important. You break your mama's back, right? You don't want to break your mama's back. You love your mama. You're not going to do that to her. Now, imagine, though, that you are late for a class and you are trying to get there because there's an exam. Do you avoid? Oh, but I don't want to hurt my mom, so let me just step carefully. Do you do that? No. Why not? Yeah. You fundamentally recognize that the saying is not true, right? It's just, as you point out, a fun, stupid saying. But it's fun to indulge in these silly ideas, right? Because that's costless for you to. But the moment that we add a cost to indulge in these idiotic ideas, these childish sayings, suddenly we stop indulging in them. If I were to say that, oh, we just had the Super Bowl, didn't we? Okay, so that won't work. What's the next sport that's coming up? For the big, like, is it World Series for baseball?
I think
Yeah.
football season starts.
Okay, let's imagine I say I think the Chicago Cubs are going to win the World Series. Does anyone follow baseball? Is that a good idea? I have no idea, by the way, if it is. I just picked the Cubs because I know the Cubs exist. Usually I get someone who is like, oh, that's unlikely.
They won a few years ago, I think.
They won a few years ago. Okay, so I'll bet like $1,000. They're going to, like, I will declare, I should say, I will declare loudly I think they're going to win. And even I won't necessarily know that they are doing badly. I don't necessarily know what's going on with them lately. I just say I love them and I live near Chicago, so I'm going to vote for them. I'm going to say that I'm going to declare quite loudly going to win. And I've had people say that's unlikely, and I will continue to believe that because I like to believe it. But the best way to get me to shut up is to ask me, "Do you want to bet?" Because now you've changed my incentives. Voters are rationally ignorant, but some voters are what we call rationally irrational. Rational irrationality. It sounds stupid, but bear with me. Thinking is annoying. It takes effort to think carefully about certain things, to evaluate and scrutinize every idea. So, people have emotional attachment to, we'll say, silly ideas. And they will indulge in them when it's cheap to do so. How many of you have ever heard of the flat earthers? All right, who are the flat earthers? Oh, everyone's heard about the flat earthers. Who are the flat earthers?
They believe that the earth is like
It's like a big disc with a little bit of a hump to it, I think. Is it one?
no, it's just
Oh, it's
flat.
just it's literally flat? Oh, I thought they thought it was a little hump. Oh, you're right. No, they think it's totally flat. Yeah, that's right. There was a documentary about them. A few of them, actually. Have you seen any documentaries about them?
No.
So there was one, so great, where they were like, and you're absolutely right, it's completely flat, because they did this thing where it's like, we're going to go out in the desert, there's totally flat land, we're going to have this laser shootout, and then really far away, we're going to have a receiver right here, and everything's going to be aligned very carefully. And the idea is, if the Earth is flat, like we think it is, it's going to get the receiver. But if the Earth is curved like the globalists think it is, then there's going to be a curve here, and it's actually going to look a little bit like this, and it's going to shoot out, and it won't pick up the receiver. It's not going to pick it up. And so, we're going to do this experiment. They went through a lot of effort to do this. It's fascinating. When we do this experiment, we're going to use this to prove the Earth. And then they did it, and guess what they found? It did not. It did this, right? It's not getting the signal. Well, that's impossible. It has to get the signal, right? There must be something wrong with the equipment, right? Is what they were saying. And so they would test it, and right? Why are they doing this? It doesn't make any sense. If you're confused why they're doing this, you are making the same mistake that people are making when they argue with people online and are confused why they are not making sense. Because you think the goal of the flat earthers or the extreme partisans, you think their goal is to understand the truth. That is not the goal. Right? They have emotional attachment to certain ideas. The flat earthers want to feel special. The partisans want to say that their side is good and the other side is bad. They want to show their group, their friends, how much they are part of that group. And so they will act and react in wildly irrational ways. Not because they're stupid, but because they are responding to the incentives put forward. And the voting booth is a cheap place to indulge in idiotic ideas. Because again, one vote won't matter. And so if you've ever looked at politics, especially now, but really throughout all of history, and you see these people who are acting in these ridiculous ways, keep in mind they're not acting ridiculous ways, or at least they are not in the sense that they have an incentive to act that way. They're not idiots, they're rationally irrational. If you want to get them to change their behavior, you get them to change their incentives. Ask them to place a bet. That can change their. Any questions? Okay.
I got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
The part like all the individuals act, the method of individuals.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people cannot be present, right? Only just one.
Only just one, yeah.
Yeah. So he's just doing what he said he would do in the campaigns and stuff, right? Like he said he would do this, he would do that. So millions know that he wanted to do that stuff. So basically doing what millions wanted him to do. So how
Well,
can we say only individuals act? It just doesn't make sense.
When we say only individuals act, we mean only individuals are making decisions. And so they make decisions on the voting booth on who to vote for. They make decisions on who to believe. Because people say all kinds of stuff in the campaign. Is that true? Do people believe them? It depends on lots of different things. And that's what we mean by only individuals act. We don't want to think in terms of groups of people acting in unison. If they are acting in unison, it's because they all happen to agree in the same way. But that doesn't mean that they are not as individuals making a decision. That?
Yes, that's
Right? Like all of you here are Montgomery College. Did you all get together and decide, let's all go to Montgomery College together? Or did you all make an individual choice on your own time and say, this seems like a good idea, I'm going to opt in, and then you all happen to have made the same choice? Right. I think the latter is more likely. Okay, so that's voters. Short version, voters don't really know what they're talking about, and when they do, they're often irrational. That doesn't mean literally all voters are like that, but this describes a lot of the electorate. A rather large hunk of them. So, let's just go to politicians. Back down. What's the incentive of a politician? What does a politician want? Voter might use the voting booth to engage in some ridiculous idea or to just sort of vote because they feel like it, and then they vote randomly. What does the politician want? Yeah, go ahead. Influence. Well, what's and so how do you maintain that influence, right? In order to get that influence, what is your main goal over and over again? What? Re-elected, right? You need to get elected, and you need to stay elected. And that's how you get the influence. That's how you maintain that power. So, let's imagine. I didn't feel like writing this all out again. So this is just for my notes. Let's imagine we have different voters, and they have these different positions on spending on military. So maybe 28 voters, and this is of course simple, right? You can make it 28,000 if you want. But 28 voters want lots of spending, very high spending. 23 want very low spending. A bunch of people in the middle. Now politicians have to take positions. So candidate Vinnick takes a very high spending. Candidate Santos takes very low spending. If everyone votes, who do you think will get the result? Who do you think will win? Who do you think will get the most votes? Yeah.
Vinnick.
What do you say, Vinnick?
I might have. Oh no, I didn't. I divided the grid wrong. Santos.
What do you think, Santos?
He has more votes.
Okay, well, let's see, because I see 23 and 28. So Vinnick will get 28 votes. But as I mentioned, all voters will vote. Who would these people vote for?
They probably vote for whoever aligns closest to their position.
Vinnick, yeah. He's like, Vinnick is a bit crazy on the spending, but Santos is ridiculously low. We'll vote for Vinnick. So yeah, you're right. They will also go there. What about the moderately high people? They will also go for Vinnick. What about the moderately low people? Santos. And the low, Santos. And the very low, of course, Santos. Vinnick has 28 plus 12 plus 10. What's 28 plus 12 plus 10? Please don't pull out your calculator. You can do it in your head. Wait, I want a 50. Yep. And Vinnick has 27, 23, and 1. It's 51. Santos wins. Well, politicians tend to look at polls, right? That's why they love looking at polls. And maybe before this happens, or Vinnick has this maybe history of this position, and he sees where the polls are. And if you can see the writing on the wall, what might you do?
Trying to convince that one moderately low guy.
Yeah. Well, let's moderate at the very least. Let's say, well, this is a great position. Let's go down here. And note when you go down here, if Vinnick adjusts his position, now the moderately low wants to vote for Vinnick. And now Vinnick wins 51 to 50. And if you're Santos and you're seeing Vinnick moderate his position during the campaign, what might you do? What? Moderate right back. Oh, I just said it right there. This is moderate. And now Santos is winning. And what you see is this moderately low position is really important because it's the flipping back and forth for this one single position that's causing the results to change. Take a closer look at that position. How many votes are above that position? How many votes are here? 50. How many votes are here? How many votes are below that position? 50. If you know your stats, or even if you don't know your stats, because this is something that's pretty old, you know that this number has an important name, begins with an M. Median. It's the middle number. Half the observations are above, half the observations are below. This leads us up here to the median voter theorem. You can write this down if you want, but it's just in the notes as well. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to necessarily write it all out on the board. If you want to zoom in a little bit. look, if everyone votes, and if voters base the policy on the closest that is closest to the ideal point on the line, right? So they're voting for whatever position is closest to them, and there are only two candidates. So if these three conditions hold, then the ideal point of the median voter will determine the outcome of the election. This is why when politicians are in the primaries, and then they win the primary and they switch to the general, their positions suddenly change. Because what is a primary? Who can vote in, say, the Democratic primary? Democrats, registered Democrats can. And registered Democrats look very different than the general population. And so the median voter of the registered Democrat is pretty far to the left. But then when you include general population, the median voter is now closer to the middle. And so Democrats moderate. Republicans do the same thing. Right? After getting the nomination, Donald Trump was something like, well, I think abortion is something we can just leave up to the state. We don't need to have a national abortion ban. Right. Politicians react to incentives. When you see a politician declare something that they really love, that they're a full-throated endorsement of, that doesn't mean they actually believe it.
So it's like populism?
Let's say popularism. I'm not pronouncing that word right. Populism. There it is. So populism has a certain connotation to it. That's like has a certain political ideology attached to it. This is more like you're just following the population, right? You're following where the median voter is and where that median voter changes. What I'm saying is when voters are saying stuff, when politicians are saying stuff, don't necessarily believe that they're being truthful or that they're being honest or that they are true believers. They're just following the election. Harris did this too. Like, for example, Kamala Harris was very much against fracking. And then suddenly she was in favor of fracking. Why was she in favor of fracking? Pennsylvania. Right? She changed her position based on the median voter to increase her chances of winning. Now, there's a lot of simplification in the median voter theorem. Like, it's not necessarily true all voters will vote. Right? If you moderate too much, some voters will say, well, screw this, I'm not going to bother. It's not always true that there's only two candidates. Sometimes there's a third-party candidate, and it changes the reaction. And, of course, there are multiple issues in mind. And so the story gets really complicated really fast. But this is a pressure that certainly exists. Any questions? Okay. So that was politicians. Do interest groups. Actually, let's do it on this one. Edward, I like that jacket. Look at this jacket, it's cool. It's got like patches on it, stylish. Let's imagine I was king of Montgomery College, and I'm like, you know what, Edward has a cool jacket. I think I'm gonna give Edward a reward for having such a cool jacket. I'm going to collect $1 from every single Montgomery College student. I'm gonna take this bundle of money and give it to Edward. How many Montgomery College students do we have? Roughly speaking. Something I keep meaning to look up before this. I can remember. Anyone want to take a guess? 3,000 sounds about right. You can look it up on I think the Wikipedia entry has 55,000.
Credit and non-credit.
It's tricky out because you do the credit and non-credit, and that's like, do you include full-time only, or do you include also part-time? We have a ton of part-time students. So we're going to go 55,000. you feel about this? I'm giving you $55,000 because you have a cool jacket. Usually it doesn't take this long for people to respond. Would you like to have $55,000 for nothing? When nothing is expected of you? You're a fan of this policy, right? You're a fan of this policy. Maybe you ethically are feeling a little bad about it, but it's just a dollar, whatever. You're a fan. How do the rest of you feel about it? You know, like, why not, Grace?
Because I lost $1.
You lost $1, yeah. You think I should get rid of the policy? Yeah. Hey, Edward. A lot of people don't like this policy. Should I get rid of it? Yes. You're so generous. Maybe I picked too generous of a person for this. I picked you a random. Generally speaking, people want to keep the policy because you think it's pretty great, right? So, would you be willing to pay me to keep the policy? You will? Yeah. Right. Maybe $10,000. Maybe $20,000. You're still coming out way ahead. Are you willing to pay me to get rid of the policy, Grace?
How much?
Well, Edward's offered me like $20,000.
If he's offering $20,000 and I offer 25, that means you lose $30. So yes.
Well, wait. This policy costs you $1. Are you willing to spend $30,000 to save yourself $1? No, right? In other words, I've concentrated the benefit into one person. And as a result, they have a really strong vested interest in maintaining that benefit. I've spread the cost out among lots of individuals. And as a result, they have very weak incentives to try to undo this. We call this, unimaginatively, concentrated benefits. Dispersed cost. I think I misspelled. No, wait, sorry. I knew that was wrong. Because costs are dispersed, because costs are spread out, we'll say. Just use a different term. The affected individuals have weak incentives to stop the policy. In fact, they might not even know about the policy. Because benefits are concentrated, are focused. Those who benefit have a strong incentive to keep or expand the policy. I mention this because we actually have a version of this at Montgomery College. In fact, we have a version of this at most schools. I don't remember if it's explicitly a line item. I think I asked someone about this and they weren't sure. But do you have, when you here at Montgomery College, is there like a activities fee? Some sort of an activities fee, right? You're nodding your head. You remember this? Yeah. What's that? What does that mean?
I think it helps pay for like transportation and stuff like that when they have the shuttle.
There's transportation.
There's a transportation fee. That's separate.
There's
Yeah.
a technology fee.
There's a technology fee. I like that. Like what? Yeah. Sure, there are these big events, right, that happen. There's also, and I think this is where the money comes from. Student council. Every college has a student council, and they have this block of money that they can dole out to individual clubs. And they say, oh, you want to have food at your event, your club event, here's some money. Oh, you want to bring a speaker to campus, here's some money. Oh, you want to take a field trip somewhere, here's some money to help with that. How many of you go to these clubs? Oh, a few of you. Interested. Does your club get money from student council? Yeah. What do you use it for?
For events.
It's nice, isn't it? It's nice because the school's paying for it. And by the school, I mean you guys. Costs are dispersed, benefits are concentrated. Right. MC Montgomery College is a board game club. You know what sometimes board game clubs do us? Yeah, student council for money so they can buy board games. It's another example of that. And if you said, well, this is dumb, we should get rid of it, you have relatively weak incentives to get rid of it, and there are very strong incentives for the people who benefit from them to maintain it. But this is just Montgomery College. We can apply this to the larger economy. Over and over again, there are examples, and there are examples in the Ed puzzle. Do you remember any of those examples? Yeah, Emily.
Dentist versus teeth.
Yeah. What's going on with the dentists?
So they also set up like a service
Uh-huh.
to help the whiten their teeth.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of people that aren't licensed also set up this service and like kiosks and malls and stuff like that. And then the dentists got mad. They're like, hey, you can't be doing this service. Like only licensed people like us can do it. And then people are like, at the kiosks, they're like, but you're literally just like putting a strip of paper.
It's easy, right?
Yeah.
But it's work. And so, who benefits from rules that say only dentists can do teeth whitening? Dentists, right? Benefits are concentrated. Who is made worse off? The teeth whiteners, but they're not politically connected, so screw them. Also, all of us. Why all of us, David? Yeah. And now, granted, well, teeth whiteners, not the non-dentists, but teeth whiteners, there's not many of them, so they politically don't have a lot of pull. They also don't have a lot of connection, so you can just ignore them. But the public, as a group, certainly can make a big difference. We can cast a bunch of votes, and we can vote the bums who allowed this rule out. Or are you going to vote based on that and get the rules out because you have to pay more for teeth whitening? I don't even know if you do teeth whitening, but let's assume you do. Are you going to vote the guys out? Well, how much more does it cost you for your teeth whitening? If we allowed more competition, sure. But the only saving it, it's costing you a little bit more. Maybe it's like $10 more, maybe it's $50 more. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. In the grand scheme of things, it's not very much money. Okay. Costs are dispersed, benefits are concentrated. So a lot of licensing, for example, comes out of this concentrated benefits dispersed cost story. Tariffs, too, come from this as well. I'm doing fine. Right? Who benefits from steel tariffs?
US Steel.
Yeah, US Steel. Steel makers. And the public pays the cost. Right? Because now things are a bit more expensive. Concentrated benefits, dispersed cost. So this is not regular Coke, this is Diet Coke. But regular Coke in the United States is different than regular Coke in, say, Mexico. Does anyone know what the big difference is? The sugar, yeah. Why does American Coke not have sugar? And they have, what's the substitute? Does anyone know what the substitute is? Corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. Why does U.S. have high fructose corn syrup, but Mexico has sugar?
Food regulations are looser.
Probably, maybe some of that, but there's two big stories that come into that.
Maybe because
Related, we do produce sugar here in the United States, but no, kind of the opposite of that. The United States has sugar tariffs. We have these really high sugar tariffs that benefit there's like one family, it's like literally like one family who grows a bunch of sugar in the United States. It's like in Florida or something. Because there's not many places you can grow sugar in the US. And so we weirdly have these sugar tariffs that make sugar a bit more expensive in the United States and benefit this one little family that can sell their stuff at a premium because they don't have to worry about the sugar tariffs. Concentrated benefits, dispersed costs. And so places like Coca-Cola are like, well, sugar is more expensive, we're going to use a substitute. Oh, you know what a great substitute is? That thing the U.S. produces that the government strongly subsidizes? Corn. And so corn subsidies, people who grow corn in the United States get all these corn subsidies. That's why you see corn grown everywhere. I'm from Iowa. I'm used to seeing corn everywhere. I was astonished when I moved out to Maryland, driving in the middle of nowhere. There's a cornfield. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? Right? It's because there's lots of corn subsidies. And so we pay farmers to grow corn. Makes corn and high fructose corn syrup really cheap. Well, it's a nice substitute for the sugar. And it benefits benefits farmers, certainly, but we all pay for it in the form of taxes. Actually, we don't pay for it in the form of taxes, as we'll discuss when we do government budget. The government borrows money to pay for a lot of stuff. Future generations pay for it. You know what future generations don't do? They don't vote. They don't exist yet. It's a great group of people to take money from, right? Politically speaking. Any other examples from the Ed puzzle? What did you think of the Ed puzzle, by the way? It was okay. Usually people love this one. You liked it? Did you want to tell me, Grace? Okay, you didn't care. That's fair. People have different preferences. Anyone else? I wonder if anyone hated it. Okay. If you hate it, I like to know because I want to, I like to update things. Anyone have anything else you want to discuss about it?
If all these regulations are kind of limiting competition and they're changing the landscape of who can buy what and what's available to consumers, doesn't that act in a way that kind of stunts capitalism?
Yeah. And so when people complain about capitalism, they tend to be complaining about the status quo. It's like, I don't like the status quo. I see the United States as a capitalist country. Therefore, I don't like capitalism. And I'm like, well, a lot of these things that people are complaining about, which are totally legitimate, do not fit with any thoughtful definition of capitalism. Certainly not the kind of capitalism that economists tend to go for. We have a distinction in economics. And you'll see this in I need to update my my practice exam because there is these references to crony capitalism, which I have since taken out of the exam, out of the class because of time issues. But we sometimes will draw a distinction between crony capitalism, which is capitalism that has a whole bunch of government favors and restriction of entry and exit and all these things to force prices up and reduce competition. And then we have free market capitalism, which has lots of competition, lots of entry, lots of ability for, low tariffs, low barriers to trade. And so no advocate of capitalism is we like crony capitalism, right? The only people who like crony capitalism are the people who are the industry incumbents who are trying to restrict competition. No one's a fan of them. Every advocate of capitalism is we like free market capitalism. We like competition. We do not like this. And so they say in the episode, I think it was a libertarian and somebody on a progressive, they found they have this in common, right? This is the problem. Sometimes it's called the captured economy. There's a book called The Captured Economy, which is, I think, was that the
Yeah.
episode? Yeah, yeah. But it comes up in lots of different areas. This story is told over and over again. Housing was a big one. Hey, do you remember the housing story? So housing is really expensive in this area. The big reason why, or an important critical reason why, is because building affordable housing is illegal. And by that, I mean single family zoning requires that if you have a plot of land, you can only put one house for one family on it. Which means, and because land is so expensive, that means that house is so expensive. And if you wanted to, say, disperse the cost of the land among lots of different families and put more density in, put in townhouses, put in some sort of apartment building, you can't. That's illegal. You can only put single family homes in. And so this restriction on supply is really great for homeowners. It's really bad for everyone else. But it's again that story. Yeah. Oh no, this is happens on all kinds of different. Most U.S. areas, most like cities in the United States, have lots of single family zoning. I just looked at this the other day because I was last month. L.A. has something like it's like 70. I want to don't quote me on that, but maybe about 70% of the residential land is single family zoning.
Is it like
It's a huge chunk.
Is it just for money or another?
I mean, that's so there's other reasons. Like some people just don't trust markets, right? They're rationally ignorant about markets. They don't know. They're like, I don't really know about this thing. If you add buildings, I don't know how that'll make things cheaper. So there's an argument. Brian Kaplan, who by the way is the one who coined rational irrationality. He also wrote a book about housing. I do have a copy of it, called Build Baby Build. And it's essentially about we need to deregulate the housing sector so we can add lots of construction. Because there's these zoning requirements make it difficult. These historic district stuff make it hard. The parking requirements make it hard. There's a long list of stuff that make it hard to build and force people to waste a lot of land. But he's also a fan of saying, but look, a lot of people just don't trust markets. You know, it's not just that homeowners have a financial incentive to restrict entry and keep the value of their house high. It's also that people just don't like that they don't trust the market process.
Like, if there's more people who think you get more expensive.
Yeah, they also think, well, they don't believe that if you add a bunch of housing, that the price of housing will go down, which boggles the mind. But that's what a lot of people do. Yeah, go ahead, Lily.
In the video, it talks about how like perfect competition or pure competition is like just a concept and not a rule. Like, I was wondering like why that would be.
So, I mean, we can do the Hayekian. I'm trying to remember the exact term that they said, but my response would be in the pure competition model, everything people sell is the same. There's no differentiation between products. And I'm like, that sounds like a really sad world. Like, all Chinese restaurants are identical. All pizza places are identical. All couches are identical. And I'm like, I don't know. I like some variety, right? I like some competition. And so some like more inventive, Chupinarian, like creative destruction, kind of the story we like. So that's why I say I'm running low on time. I have to cover one more thing. But that would be my answer to that. Like, competition is great, but making everything literally the same to make it pure doesn't sound like a good idea. And that's there's a famous essay by economist F.A. Hayek called "The Meaning of Competition." And he's like, look, this is stupid. Right? Actual competition is not about making everything the same. Actual competition is about productivity. Last thing, rent. Economic rent. When I say rent, I do not mean rent in the this is what I have to pay in order to live at this particular location. In economics, rent has a different term. We will talk next unit about like rent in the classic sense of the term, but rent in economics is simply when you enrich yourself without enriching others. Without enriching society. Trade does not result in rent. You make an exchange. I mean, on the basic level, you make an exchange, both parties are better off, society as a whole is happier. But I take money from everybody and I give it to just Edward. Or I increase the price of sugar and give it to just the sugar producer. Or I make housing more expensive and then the small group benefits. That's a transfer. Some people are made worse off, other people are made better off. Society as a whole has not been better off. It's rent. Rent seeking is the act of pursuing rents. This is one of the things lobbyists do. It's not the only thing they do. I don't want to say that they're bad people. But the criticism of lobbyists is essentially they are seeking favors from the government. They're seeking special protection. They're seeking some kind of additional benefit in order to engage in the concentrated benefits dispersed cost story. Oh, you should ban this dye. We who make an alternative dye. Even though the other dye is fine, we'll say it's really bad. For example. Or people who say, well, you got to put the steel tariffs on, we who produce steel, because it's really important for national defense, we say. But really, of course, concentrated benefits, dispersed costs. That is the economic argument for why this is sustainable and why people are willing to pay money to share some of those concentrated benefits with the political actors in order to try to achieve these results. Any questions? No? And of course, as a side note, it's not just the money, it's also the support. Steel unions also love tariffs. And maybe they can't necessarily give them money, they can give them the support, because ultimately it's not even the money that matters, it's the votes. It's the votes. So, with that in mind, I believe I'm out of time. Let's see. I have more examples in the notes. This all seems to suggest, though, that democracy isn't all that great. Perhaps we should go back to monopoly. But keep in mind, all of these problems are worse under monarchy. All of these problems occur under all forms of government. As Winston Churchill once famously said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Right? We're not, it's a matter, we don't want to commit the nirvana fallacy. We just have a lot of flawed, bad choices. Democracy makes these choices less bad, but we should not pretend that they don't exist. We should not be romantic about it. With that in mind, I let you go, and I will see all of you on Tuesday.